Radio for Readers, Bookmark.
This is Bookmark. I'm Marc Bernier. The nation's top authors are coming up next. It's always great when you can say you've got an old friend that's come back to be with you. Walter Isaacson is back with us. He was on our program a few years ago. He's back with the Innovators, how a group of hackers, geniuses, and geeks created the digital revolution. Walter Isaacson, welcome back to Bookmark. It's good to see you again, sir.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Mark, and it's good to see you again. Thanks.
So many great people have come through the ranks, and we're living in an age now which, as you know, nothing is secret anymore.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder, are we almost at the tipping point where everybody is aware that you have no privacy and that anything you put online is there?
You know, it's something I've been thinking about for a long time because, for the past 3,000 years, we didn't have a lot of privacy. You lived in a small village, a small town. I grew up in New Orleans. If I walked down to the corner K&B drugstore and bought a pack of Marlboro, my parents would find out within about 3 or 4 minutes because, people knew who you were in small towns. But in the past, say, since the Industrial Revolution, people moving to cities, you have an expectation not only of privacy, but of anonymity, as if you can do things and nobody knows who you are. That's being lost in the digital age. There's a downside of that because you want your privacy. There's a little bit of an upside to it as well because it's good for people to be responsible for their words that they post, responsible for what they do. So like anything in this great digital revolution, it's a bit of a balance.
I think that I found in my own experience that a lot of people didn't realize that anywhere you go, you could be on video somehow. There are police cameras everywhere. In Florida now, Walter, it's a big issue as to whether communities will opt out of these cameras, traffic cameras, because of the concerns that they're simply a cash cow. Do you think we're going to see more of that or less of it?
Oh, I think what you're going to see more of is big data, where if I walk around, I have my iPhone in my pocket, I have my GPS on, I'm looking for, a restaurant, all of that's in a database somewhere, and somebody will mine that data. I think you should be able to opt in and opt out. I must say, I'm a little weird maybe, but I find it convenient that my phone knows where I am and I can, have somebody even send me an advertisement saying if you need a good cup of coffee, it's 2 blocks away. I think some people get freaked out about that. So I think what you need is individual choice. That's what America has been built on since the beginning, is this notion of if you want to opt out or opt into something, fine, but don't ever deceive me.
In this new book, will Americans come to realize that bandwidth is the new gold?
Well, first of all, it was silicon processing power that was the gold. In fact, that's why they call it Silicon Valley, because silicon was the new gold. And Gordon Moore, who's one of the heroes of my book, comes up with what's called Moore's Law, which is that the processing power of a chip of silicon will double every 18 months or so. And that becomes the law that allows personal computers to exist and for every type of computing to become more personal, more intimate, smaller, and cheaper. That is being connected to the power, and it's a good question, Mark, of networks. And when you connect the computer or your phone, which serves as your computer, to a network like the internet, then you have something that's like connecting the steam engine of the Industrial Revolution to mechanical, machinery. That creates an explosive revolution. And so now bandwidth is becoming also like processing power. You want as much bandwidth and as processing power as you can get. I think the problem comes when we have too many monopolies controlling the amount of bandwidth coming into our home. I'm somebody who believes in the market, so I really want free competition. And if you can't have competition on the bandwidth coming into your home, you have to find either ways to force competition or to make it into a utility.
Who's winning the war? Is it the cable companies or the telephone companies or the television networks? Who's going to win the war?
Well, at the moment, the cable companies are winning the war because they have almost a monopoly on the best form of high bandwidth connectivity that goes into most homes. And so they can take especially if Comcast and Time Warner merge, they can take the broadcast networks, content producers, movie producers, and they have a bit of a stranglehold because they're the ones who control whether or not these people get into the home. That's why I'm hoping, not that there's a whole lot of regulation, but that there's some competition, that we find new ways to open up more bandwidth so that I can have 6, 7 choices of how I get stuff into my home.
All right, maybe it's a sensitive question, but I'll ask it anyway because I'm with you on market.
Yeah.
But this Time Warner Comcast thing almost feels way too big.
Well, that's my point. It is too much concentration of power in the hands of one company that will be able to tell not only the current broadcasters or people who make TV or Netflix and Amazons that are creating content, but we don't know what's going to be invented next. I mean, I wouldn't have thought Netflix and Amazon would be in the movie business or TV business, but now they are. And who knows what new type of video, Twitter or something will come along. And you want to make sure that people have open roads that they can drive their entrepreneurship and innovation on, as opposed to just one road and you have to get permission to drive on it.
Excellent point. I'm wondering if, because you're a free market guy, this country has historically regulated things like phone companies and things, and it's so much bigger now. Should the federal government have any role at all in being the watchdog for the consumers so that their choices aren't limited? Or do you think the free market dictates whoever's the strongest is going to own the most?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I truly believe in competition in the market. I think when you don't have easy competition, and there's some physical reasons you can't have, dozens of cables being dug up through your sidewalk and going into your home. So there's a somewhat of a natural monopoly. We don't have competition, for example, in where we get our electricity. We have to get our electricity from the local utility, but it's regulated like a utility. So the question is, in a very complicated balance, whether you can have some form of network neutrality, meaning the person who has the pipeline into your home can control what you decide you want to get over that pipeline. Well, that's a regulation. I think it's a necessary regulation right now when you don't have a lot of choice, but I think the goal should be not more regulation, but eventually finding technological ways or even ways of making the last mile of cable into a public utility anybody can jack into, and then have competition on who's doing the rest of the network.
Is innovation moving so fast, Walter, that it will be impossible to have any policing to protect people? In other words, those who try to pirate from other countries, lock up files, contaminate, cause harm, will it be impossible, or you think that there's a mechanism down the road that will give some sort of law enforcement?
Oh, no, I think there's always going to be a struggle, and I think, if you just look at your email this morning, how much spam you got, and people telling you that they're from wherever they are and they're going to give you $1 million. And, you would think you could regulate something like that. One of the upsides and downsides of the way the Internet was invented, which is a whole part of my book, is that it pretty much guarantees some anonymity, meaning, the Internet protocol address something's coming from, but every node on the Internet can, forward packets, store packets. So nobody can say, I'm going to control and find out who's putting this into the network. And that means that people can do scams, people can hack into your machines, and I think we'll always have to have a tug of war or a battleground between the defense that we play to keep our machines and our phones safe, and hackers and spam artists and scam artists who are trying to get into it.
Walter, your thoughts, the president's recent statements on the Internet and managing and controlling, and some people say it's the road to taxing it. Is he very far off the mark or very far on the mark?
I think he's a little bit closer to the mark than some of the critics would say. I don't think it's geared to taxing it. I'm sure you get a lot of phone calls and angry letters saying that's the secret plan, is to tax it. I think the issue that he was facing and that the FCC and Tom Wheeler faces is what I said earlier, which is that when you only have 1 or 2 broadband pipelines for Internet into the home, and you don't want them to favor certain things. For example, suppose I have, Mr. Marc cable is the only service I can get in a certain part of Florida. I don't want you to say, hey, Netflix, pay me a lot of money, and I won't put Amazon movies on, or I won't put NBC on. I want to be able to choose what I want. I want the Internet to be open. I want it to be free. And I want it to be, by my choice, what I get when I want, at the speed I want. And so I think that's what net neutrality is about. It's a difficult thing to do, but what you're trying to do is say it's like an open road or a phone system. Nobody at the phone company tells you well, your phone lines, you have to pay extra to get in because we're going to favor somebody else's music service on our phone lines.
I've heard a couple of things from consumers, Walter. They're concerned at net neutrality, that cable companies could just say, you know what, you go to that website a lot, we're going to limit how many times you can go there, or we're going to dial back your bandwidth, so it's going to be a lot slower.
Well, that's what would happen if you don't have net neutrality. I think net
Yeah.
neutrality is, I'm not totally afraid of that because any cable company would do that, would be crazy, and the cable companies aren't crazy. They're just, they're just trying to make a profit. But I don't think any cable company should be able to say, you're getting too many movies, or you're going to this site, we're going to charge you a premium this way. I think that that's why it should be neutral. You should be in charge of how you use the bandwidth into your home, where you go. And they say, well, we can regulate it so that, or the cable companies might say, well, we already have existing deals, so you don't have to worry. But we don't know what new Netflix and new Amazons and new NBC, or, I just now started using CBS-N, which is CBS News.
How do you like that?
I love it because I actually cut the cord in New York of having cable, so I use CBS News online, and I watch the news on my iPhone when I'm sitting at the airport. I don't want, when I go to my home, where I get internet access and I have Wi-Fi in my home that comes in through the cable, I don't want them to say, well, CBS-N can't be on, or we're going to charge you extra if you use it. And that's something new, so you can't regulate things that haven't been invented yet. That's why you need competition.
As a broadcaster, do you think that this is the future of broadcast delivery
Absolutely.
of news?
I don't think I'm going to be using, my daughter doesn't have a TV. She's 25 years old. She lives in an apartment with 4 friends. They all have computers and they all have iPhones or smartphones, and they all need internet access, and they all complain they have to get it from the cable company because they don't even buy the cable TV offerings. But I don't think anybody under the age of 25 is ever going to generally watch TV the way you and I grew up doing it, where you turn on and see what's on, and you do it on the TV broadcaster schedule, not your own.
You think it's likely to be mostly demand?
Mostly
on demand, so the people can watch it when they want to?
I think there's certain things that'll be live. I'm here Saturday, the college football games I'd love to be watching now. But I think that normally, when you go home at night, you're going to say, I want to watch Charlie Rose, I want to watch the movie The Imitation Game, and you're not going to say, when is it on and what station is it on? And that's what Steve Jobs was trying to invent when he was doing Apple TV. He wanted you to be able to go into your house and just say, put on Charlie Rose, and the TV would put on the latest, show that Charlie had done.
If you were going to grade geniuses of our time, where would Jobs be?
Jobs would be the most intuitive, creative, imaginative genius in terms of understanding beauty, understanding what the consumer might want, and in that sort of imaginative way, like, 1,000 songs in your pocket, let's change the entire music industry. If you compared him and contrasted him with Bill Gates, for example, somebody who's also born in 1955, a friend as well as competitor of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, in my mind, had more conventional mental processing power, if you know what I mean. I'd walk into his office, he'd have 2 huge computer screens, each with 4 screens, 4 things going at once, and he'd be processing a lot of data and answering emails with the other side of his brain. And so he was somebody who, I find to be an awesome genius when it comes to processing power. But did he have the same taste as Steve Jobs? No. Bill Gates built the Zune. Steve Jobs built the iPod. So it depends, where do you want to apply your genius?
This new book by Walter Isaacson is a must-read, too, because it does give you history, and you do salute, the people who made the change.
Some of the unsung heroes, too. A friend of mine just emailed me who'd read it and said, this is the history of our generation, just as Vietnam was the history of a previous generation, or World War II, or maybe the Depression was. If we look at what's the history of our generation, people who are, say, 20 to 50 years old, 20 to 60 years old, the history of our generation is the digital revolution, the revolution that came from creating computers, creating networks, and connecting them.
And by the way, as a nostalgic note to close, when we last spoke, we talked about Benjamin Franklin.
Dr. Franklin would have loved this. Yeah.
Twice I've read that book. I never realized the things that he meant to this country, and he meant to science.
Yeah, and here's another thing that surprised me when I was writing this book about networks and computers. Ben Franklin loved to invent gadgets. he also loved to invent networks. He creates the postal system in the United States and even has the first net neutrality debate because he's favoring his own newspapers and almanacs and others through the postal system until he decides the country's stronger if you have a postal system that's neutral and it carries everybody's newspapers and almanacs and books. And so that debate that's 250, 300 years old, we can still have today, which is why I love Dr. Franklin, but also why I love the people who you've probably never heard of, because I hadn't, people like Lick Licklider, Doug Engelbart, Alan Kay, the people who created the computer and the internet.
The Innovators, Walter Isaacson, our guest today on Bookmark. Great to see you again, sir.
All right, Mark, good
Thanks
to see
so
you.
much.
Thanks.
That's Bookmark for this week. If you have comments or thoughts on future authors, send an email to us at our website, bookmark.us. That's our broadcast for today. Thanks for watching.
Bookmark.